a guard. Most unusual guard this in all the Empire's armies. The only all-Aboriginal squad in the AIF. Original Aboriginal Anzac.
The history of service by Indigenous Australians in the military is not generally well known. It probably never be accurately known how many Indigenous Australians have served in the Australian Defence Force, due mainly to the fact that racial heritage was never required to be documented when enlisting. Generally, service records do not provide an indication whether a member was Aboriginal or not. However, there are some indicators within the service records that provide an indication to a person's heritage. The most common was that the soldier had a dark complexion or listed a known Aboriginal mission or mission station as his place of birth or residence. Some additional comments can be found in the distinctive marks box on these records or in other areas on the service record. Even today in the ADF, it is only voluntary to tick the box, are you Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? Despite restrictions on the enlistment by people of substantially non-European origins that existed until 1949, Indigenous Australians have served in every conflict and peacekeeping operation that Australia has participated in for over 100 years.
The Anzac story, up until around 2003, actually denied Indigenous service. So there was a period of time there where you would be forgiven for being mistaken, for thinking that Anzac was only attended by white soldiers. Then it was discovered that there really was Indigenous soldiers who were there at Gallipoli. And this service has really allowed us to demonstrate that the Anzac spirit and Anzac Day itself really is a true representation of Australia's diverse culture.
The Australian War Memorial is presently compiling a list of Indigenous Australians who served, are serving, and those who have served in ancillary roles within the ADF. We have at present over 1,000 names of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who fought in the First World War. It is not known what motivated Aboriginal people to join the AIF, but loyalty and patriotism would have played a part. The incentive of a wage. In the first AIF, everybody was paid the same, and that pay was a good 6 shillings a day for a private. That was comparable to a worker in Australia, and far greater than the pay of British soldiers. Soldiers could send money home, though in some cases that was diverted by the various agencies which controlled Indigenous settlements, so the money never reached soldiers' families. Other motives for enlisting were the warrior tradition. Many joining up were only a generation away from traditional life. They may have thought that by serving they were protecting their lands and communities. The Army was probably the first equal opportunity employer of Indigenous Australians. When you had the uniform on, colour disappeared. You had the same chances as a white soldier to be killed, captured, to be promoted, to win medals, and you bled red, just like your mates in the trenches. Many who tried to enlist were rejected on the grounds of race, but this did not deter others. Some tried to enlist more than once. Of the estimated 1,000 Indigenous soldiers who served in the Australian Imperial Force during the First World War, it is believed that around 250 to 300 made the ultimate sacrifice. That's out of an estimated Indigenous population at the time of 80,000. Recent research by the Australian War Memorial and volunteers across the nation have identified a total of 72 Aboriginal men who served on Gallipoli, 13 of whom were killed in action, and we have identified the resting place of 8 of the soldiers.
We had an Indigenous soldier propose this to the Defence Force.
So the idea for the ceremony came from, I suppose, myself. In 2013, when we were looking at planning the 100-year commemoration at Anzac Cove in Gallipoli, I started thinking, what would I be commemorating at the same time? And for me, it wasn't just about recognising the Australian fallen soldiers that were there. It was also about recognising the Aboriginal men that served, fought and died there. So the idea was about recognising their service and acknowledging their contributions through our customs and traditions.
Then we had the Army Indigenous Cultural Advisory Group, who is a representative Indigenous body that advises the Chief of Army. drive this to actually be implemented. And then once it got started, it was actually led by Indigenous people, and then it was developed by Indigenous people, and then it was conducted by Indigenous people.
For me, I wanted to honour my ancestors through traditional law and through our customs and traditions.
Indigenous cultures are not one culture, they're all individual cultures. And prior to European settlement, they were effectively 600 individual countries with their own language, their own practices and their own belief systems.
My law teaches me that when we die, our spirit leaves our physical body and enters the earth, and then our ancestors walk us back to country. So the collection of the soil represents our connection to country and represents our law and story business.
It was quite amazing to have Uncle Roy, Uncle Harry and Commander Bertram Slate, the three senior Indigenous members of the three services. But particularly having Uncle Roy and Uncle Harry there, who were quite senior veterans and had done active service at a time when Indigenous people didn't have the same freedoms that we have today.
Being involved in this project for me and my family, it was about honouring the warrior spirit, about respect, and also about recognition for my ancestors' service, particularly the service that they gave and contributions they made at the time. For my colleagues, I think it was the same, but it was also about Army's commitment towards reconciliation, and also about serving Aboriginal men and women and Torres Strait Islanders, about their culture and service currently in the Australian Defence Force.
We don't blame the people who are here today for what has happened in the past. This story is one of great sadness, where we had soldiers who were prepared to die for the Australia that we all enjoy today, but they weren't recognised the same as everybody else. And in Army and Defence, allowing us to go forward and do this ceremony, we were able to at least bridge a little bit of that gap and make good on our promise to honour these soldiers in the way that we should have initially. This ceremony is, in effect, us doing what we think was right to recognise those soldiers that went before us.
The centrepiece of today's ceremony is a hollow log. It contains soil from locations representative of where our soldiers may have fallen.
The key points for the ceremony were based on Aboriginal sorry business. And Aboriginal sorry business is the actual pastoral care you should provide to an Indigenous spirit as they pass. So the key elements of that are the treatment of the remains, physical as well as the spiritual. And the soil at the place of where someone died has a direct connection to their spirit. So collecting the soil is equivalent to actually collecting the spirit. So it was the soil collection which actually underpinned the whole collection ceremony. And the ceremony that we did was based on Aboriginal sorry business. We do a calling ceremony, which is a call out to invite any spirits to join us and telling them that we're heading back home to Australia. Then once we've done the calling and we collect the soil, then we do a traditional smoking ceremony which wards off evil spirits. And the smoking ceremony is a cleansing. That in effect is the end of the sorry business. And once we complete that, we're able to then celebrate the service of these soldiers. So the Aboriginal soldiers paid a tribute to the kangaroo and emu spirits, and the Torres Strait Islanders did a traditional warrior dance in honour of the warrior ancestors. Then at the end of the service, we then returned back to Australia to return that soil back under the custodianship of the Australian War Memorial. And the lone pine tree is important in Canberra in that it was actually seeded from a pine cone provided to the War Memorial from one of the Gallipoli soldiers. So this tree has a direct connection to Gallipoli, which has a direct connection now for us through us transferring soil to and from that place.
Thank you all for coming today for this very important business. I hope you enjoy the time in this beautiful Ngunnawal country, and I would like to close by saying the words of our people, Nagana, Yarrabai, Yangu, which means you're welcome to leave your footprints on our land, or in other words, welcome to Ngunnawal country.
Auntie Agnes, Defence Indigenous Elders, in particular Uncle Roy from the Army, thank you for being here to participate in this important ceremony. Army and the wider Australian Defence Force has a strong Indigenous community, and today we honour and embrace the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander service, while we welcome home the spirits of those warriors who have served in the First World War and paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Hello! Honor guard! Turn! Cut!
The soldiers here today provide a reflection of the Indigenous diversity serving within today's Army. And as we learn more about Indigenous service throughout the First World War, we find equally diverse history, human history. These are great Australian soldiers. I was present at the final soil collection at Gallipoli and was moved, as indeed were all, by the significance and the image of these soldiers performing a traditional ceremony ancient in its origins on the ground where the Anzacs landed 100 years ago.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Walla turi kuyira couple couple, turi kuna couple couple. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. Walla walari ngu parimba kuyira, walla walari ngu ural. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, Wanthu Thuri Waripa, Patalanka. We will remember them. Pinampikuna Kayila Tharana.
Of all current and former serving soldiers of the Australian Army, and more broadly on behalf of the Australian Defence Force, I am honoured to welcome these warriors and their spirit home to our land. Thank you.
The Bangarra Dance Company is a dance company which is internationally acclaimed, and they combine traditional Indigenous dance and traditional practices with modern dance procedures and practices to create a performance which is culturally sensitive and very meaningful in today's world. So we look to Bangarra to help us transition from being focused on one culture to developing this ceremony to try to make it as broad as possible. And they taught our soldiers how to dance the kangaroo and emu dance, and they provided input on the warrior dance, and they provided a bit of an oversight on how the ceremony should look. So once we had the ceremony fully developed, we then had a farewell ceremony at Glebe Park near the scarred tree, attended by the Redfern Aboriginal community, where we performed a smoking ceremony and we demonstrated the key elements of the ceremony. And the community were very pleased and very happy with what we were doing.
Well, I decided to join the army because my father was in the Necru. Bringing back the spirit back home is very important to us.
I'm representing the Torres Strait side of the Indigenous. For us to be here to witness this Aboriginal ceremony, it felt really good to be a part of it, to stand brothers in arms with them as they done. In my family, my great-great-grandfather was in the World War II, the Torres Strait Light Infantry Battalion. So as a young boy growing up, there were stories of my grandfather being in the army. So growing up, seeing all my uncles and fathers enlisting in the army, and that, it gave me the drive to want to join the army as well. I know back home, all of the Torres Strait Islands are proud that we do have representation in this as well.